I'm Reverend Lawrence Adele Seafood with Cities of Hope Ministry here at All Points TV and Omni Orbis Church. And thank you for tuning in today to another 15 minutes to a greater understanding. Today we're going to talk about what is the um, what is the reason for the 400-year silence between the Old and New Testament. Well, the 400-year gap between Malachi and the Old Testament book and the arrival of John the Baptist is known as the intertestamental period, or 400 silent years. Historically, it was anything but silent. It was a dynamic era of political, cultural, and religious upheaval that perfectly set the historical stage for a New Testament. The divine perspective was theologically, this pause between the Old and New Testament is seen as God intentionally withholding new prophetic revelation and building anticipation. There was no miracles until Jesus arrived on the scene. It was a period of waiting where no prophet spoke, adding massive emphasis to the monumental arrival of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Historically and cultural transformation. During this time, the geopolitical landscape of the Bible and time shifted dramatically, preparing the world for the spread of Christianity. You see, they were waiting for the spread of Christianity. The rise of Greek culture. Alexander the Great conquered the region, making Greek the universal language, Koine Greek. This latter allowed the gospel to be communicated across diverse nations using one common tongue. And that was done with the Koine Greek. Establishment of synagogues within the temple in Jerusalem, distant for many local Jewish communities, formed synagogues as place of worship and education, which later provided Paul, an early missionary, Paul or Saul of Tarsus, early missionaries, a perfect platform to preach. Roman infrastructure also. Rome took control of the region, establishing the Pax Roma, Roman peace, and constructing vast road networks from one area to the other, from east to west. This drastically reduced travel times and made missionary journeys possible. Now, religious and political shifts, foreign oppression also caused. The Jewish people suffered under the various oppressive rulers, including a time when the selective king Antiochus the Fourth desecrated the Jewish temple, and rise of Jewish sect. Now, groups of like the Pharisees, Sadducees, and essence emerged during this time as they tried to figure out how to maintain their religious purity in a deeply pagan world. There was pantheism and many gods. This intense environment fueled a passionate, widespread longing for a promised Messiah who would rescue Israel. Well, to dive deeper into this historical timeline or theological meaning of this era, you can explore detailed breakdowns in this and that was caused. This where What were the 400 years of silence? Well, the 400 years of silence refers to the time between the Old Testament and the New Testament, and during which, so far as we know, present day, God did not speak. God didn't speak for 400 years. No scriptures was written. The 400 years of silence began with the warning that closed the Old Testament. Behold, I am going to send you Elijah, the prophet, before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord. He will restore the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, so that I will not come and smite the land with a curse. And that's Malachi 4, 5, and 6. And end with the coming of John the Baptist, the Messiah's forerunner, which was also Jesus' cousin. And at the time of Malachi's warning, about 430 BC, the Jews had returned to Israel from the Babylonian captivity as merchants, not shepherds. The Medo-Persian Empire still ruled Israel, and the temple had been rebuilt. Both the law and the priesthood of Aaron's line had been restored, and the Jews had given up their worship of idols. Nevertheless, Malachi's warning was not without cause, ladies and gentlemen. The Jewish people were mistreating their wives, marrying pagans, and not tithing. All those are important things to not cause the church to grow. And the priests were neglecting the temple and not teaching the people the ways of God. In short, the Jews were not honoring God. In 333 BC, Israel fell to the Greeks. And in 323 BC, it fell to the Egyptians. The Jews generally were treated well throughout those reigns, and they adopted the Greek language and many of Greek customs and manners. And in Egypt, the Old Testament was translated into Greek. That translation, the Septuagint, came into widespread use and is quoted frequently in the New Testament. Jewish law and the priesthood remained more or less intact until Antiochus the Great of Syria captured Israel in 204 BC. He had his successors, Antiochus Epiphanes, persecuted the Jews and sold the priesthood. And in 171 BC, Epiphanes desecrated the Holy of Holies. The desecration resulted in an uprising by Judas of the Maccabees, of the priest line of Aaron. And in 165 BC, the Jews recaptured Jerusalem. Herod cleansed the temple. However, fighting continued between the Jews and the Syrians until the Romans gained control of Israel in 63 BC, at which time Pompey walked into the Holy of Holies, once again shocking and embittering the Jews. In 47 BC, Caesar installed Amphitheater and descendants of Esau as procurators of Judea, and Antiparch subsequently appointed his two sons as kings over Galilee and Judea as it split. As the New Testament opens, Antipater's son, Herod the Great, a descendant of Esau, was king, and the priesthood was politically motivated and not on the line of Aaron. Politics also resulted in the development of two major factions, the Sadducees and the Pharisees. The Sadducees favored the liberal attitude and practices of the Greeks. They held to only the Torah as regards religion, but lost most aristocrats and did not think God would have any part in governing the nation. The Pharisees were conservatives, zealots, who, with the help of the scribes, developed religious law to the point where the concerns and cares of the people were essentially meaningless. Additionally, synagogues, new places of worship, and social activities had sprouted up all over the country, and religious and civil matters were governed by the lesser and the greater Sanhedrins, which were the ruling class of the synagogue. The greater Sanhedrins, being compromised of a chief priest and 70 other members that handled out justice, sometimes by 39 lashes administered with full force, as Jesus took those 40 minus 1 lashes. Between the time of Malachi and the coming of the Messiah, several prophecies were fulfilled, including the 2,300 days of desecration between 107 and 165 BC. Daniel 8:14. However, the people did not put to good use either the fulfilled prophecies nor the 400 years the nation was given to study scripture, to seek God. Psalms 43 through 44, and to prepare for the coming Messiah. In fact, those years blinded and defeated the nation to the point where most of the Jews could not even consider the concept of a humble Messiah. If you look at Zechariah 9:9 and Isaiah 9:10 and John 12:40, almost 2 millennia have passed since the New Testament canon was completed. And through the words, though the words is full of grace and truth, and through the birth, life, and death of Jesus, fulfilled a staggering array of prophecies. The Jews as a people have yet to come to open their eyes and ears, but Jesus is coming again, and one day a remnant will both see and hear of Jesus Christ. Well, the thing is, this 400 years of silence was important because the church was organizing. They were waiting for the Messiah. They were waiting for things to happen. They were waiting for the Jews to reorganize from the Old Testament to the New Testament. And all this took time and place. And because of the time, it was very important. Why was God silent for 400 years? Well, the 400 years silence between Malachi and the New Testament was not a period of inactivity, but a time of preparation for the word. It was designed to build anticipation for the Messiah, Jesus Christ, allow for the precise sovereign orchestration of global events like the rise of Rome, the Greek language, and to highlight the inadequacy of human effort, making the arrival of Jesus more impactful. Well, thank you for tuning in to another program of 15 minutes to a greater understanding. And be with us tomorrow when we talk about what is the proper protocol when someone has aught against you. See you then.